Good morning. I am Swapna Shaji, Assistant Professor, Department of Commerce, Self, NIRMALA College, MUVATTUPUZHA. Today, I am going to discuss about an interesting topic, the factors affecting the requirements of working capital. Before discussing about the factors affecting the requirements of working capital, we should understand what do you mean by working capital. The capital needed for an organization can be basically classified into two, that is fixed capital and working capital. Fixed capital is the permanent capital which is invested in the fixed assets such as plant and machinery, land and building, etc. Whereas, what is working capital? Working capital is needed for the day-to-day operation of an organization. It is invested in the current assets such as cash, receivables, inventory, debtors, etc. The working capital is defined in different approaches. There are basically two approaches that are operating cycle approach and balance sheet approach. As per operating cycle approach, the working capital means the total amount invested in the operating cycle of an organization. What is operating cycle? Operating cycle starts from the raw material and end with cash, which means the raw material is converted into work in progress, then the work in progress is converted into finished goods, then the finished goods is converted into receivables, then the receivables is again converted into cash. So that the total amount invested in these factors is called operating cycle concept. So working capital as per operating cycle is the sum total of all these factors. Then the second approach is balance sheet approach. Again, the balance sheet approach can be classified into two, that is gross working capital approach and net working capital approach. As per gross working capital approach, the working capital is the sum total of all the current assets of an organization. Then what do you mean by current assets? The current assets are those assets which are held for a short period of time. It includes cash, inventory, stock, work in progress, debtors, receivables, bills receivables, etc. So, the total money invested in these current assets is called working capital as per gross working capital approach. Then the second approach as per balance sheet approach is the net working capital approach. As per this approach, the working capital is the difference between current assets and current liabilities. Then we can see what is current liability. Current liabilities are those liabilities which are payable within a 1 year of time period. It includes bank overdraft, trade creditors, bills payable, etc. So, as per net working capital approach, the working capital means the total current assets minus total current liabilities. So, we can classify the working capital into two, that is as per gross working capital approach, it is the sum total of all current assets of an organization. However, as per net working capital approach, it is the difference between current assets. Then we can see what are the various factors affecting the requirements of working capital. The first and most important factor of working capital is the nature of the business. The nature of the business can be classified into basically three, that is public utility undertakings, manufacturing undertakings and trading undertakings. Most of the public utility undertakings are concentrate on cash sales only. The examples are water supply, electricity, railway, etc. They are focusing on cash sales only, so that the requirement of working capital is comparatively very low. However, in case of manufacturing concern need a sizable amount of working capital along with the investment in fixed assets like plant and machinery, land and building, etc. But in case of trading concerns need more and more working capital in order to satisfy the increased demand of the customers, because they are concentrate majority on credit sales, so that the majority of their amount is blocked in the form of credit sales. So that the requirement of working capital in trading concerns is very high. So, we can arrange these three types of organization in the ascending order of their requirements of working capital. First one is public utility undertakings, second one is manufacturing undertakings, and last one is trading concern. So, the first factor that affecting the requirements of working capital is the nature of the organization. Second factor is the size of the organization. The business concern can basically classified into two types, that is small sized organization and large sized organization. In case of greater business or large sized business organization, as the size indicate, the requirements of working capital is very high, because they need to satisfy the more and more needs of the customers. Then in case of small scale enterprise, comparatively working capital requirements is very low. However, in sometimes the requirement of working capital in small scale organization is very high due to inefficiency of the management, wastage of available scarce resources, etc. So, based on the size of the business, the working capital requirements is varying. Next factor that affecting the working capital requirements is production policy. The production policy is also influences the requirements of working capital. If the raw material of a particular goods or services is seasonal in nature, but the organization follow a stable production policy, it will affect the requirements of working capital. That types of organization need to procure the raw material during seasonal period and need to store for off-season period. This will increases or majority of the amount is blocked in form of inventory in that organization. So, the need of working capital is very high in the case of stable production policy. The next factor that affecting the requirements of working capital is the length of the production cycle. Production cycle is started from raw material and finished up to finished products. It is the process of converting the raw materials into work in progress, then the work in progress into finished products. The time taken for the conversion of raw material to finished products affects the requirements of working capital. If the time is very longer period, then majority of the working capital is blocked in the form of inventory. It increases the requirements of working capital. However, in the raw material conversion period is very low, the need for working capital is also very low. The next factor that affecting the requirements of working capital is operating cycle. Operating cycle is a simple concept. It starts with the raw material and end with the cash. It includes purchase of raw material, conversion of raw materials into finished work in progress, then work in progress into finished goods, then finished goods into sales, and again the sales into cash. Then this cash is used for the purchase of raw material. The time taken for the conversion of raw materials into cash will also affect the requirements of working capital. If the time is very longer period, it increases the requirements of working capital. The next factor that affects the requirements is credit policy. If a firm follow the policy of credit purchases and cash sales, the cash is readily available after the sale of the goods and services, but in case of purchase of raw material, it is credit basis, so that no amount is blocked in the raw material. However, in the company follow the policy of cash purchase of raw material and credit sale of goods and services, it will increases the requirements of working capital, because majority of the amount is blocked in the form of credit sales, that is, so that the requirements of working capital is very high. The next factor that affecting the requirement of working capital is business cycle. Business cycle it is a situation in which there is an alternate contraction and expansion of business activities. It include boom, recession, depression, etc. During the boom period, there is an optimistic situation in which increase in sales, rise in price, increased demands, etc. So, in order to satisfy the increased demands of the customers, the firm needs to produce more and more goods and services. So, it will increases the need of working capital. However, during the depression period, the opposite happens. It includes decrease in price, decrease in demand, and decrease in purchasing power of the customers. In that situation also, due to shortage in price or amount in the hands of customer, the majority of the amount is blocked in the form of credit sales. So, it also increases the requirements of working capital. So, we can see that during boom period, the need of working capital is very high for satisfying the increased demand of the customer. However, during depression period, the demand of working capital or requirements of working capital is very high due to shortage of amount in the hands of customers. The next factor that affecting the requirements of working capital is dividend policy. The dividend policy also affects the requirements of working capital. If the firm follow a stable dividend policy, irrespective of the earning capacity of the organization, it will increases the demand of working capital. However, the firm follow a dividend policy in relation to the earning capacity of the business, it will decreases the requirements of working capital. So, the dividend policy followed by the organization has a great impact on the requirements of working capital. Then next factor is the expansion of business. If there is a scope for further expansion of the business activity, it increases the demand for meeting the advanced needs and wants of the customer, they need to increase more and more products and services for the customer. It will increase the demand of working capital. So, if there is an opportunity for expansion of the business activity, it increases the demand of working capital. Then the last point is some other factors that affect the requirements of working capital. Majority of those factors are internal in nature. It includes inefficiency of the management, inefficiency of the labor, wastage of available resource, etc. If the management is not able to manage the available resource or available labor, it will increases the need of working capital. At the same time, if the labors increase the wastage of available resources by the labors, it also affects the requirements of working capital. So far, till now, we have discussed about what are the various factors affecting the requirements of working capital, what you mean by working capital, and the two concepts regarding the working capital, and various factors that affecting the requirements of working capital. Hope you have understood. Thank you.